You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players, and all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 148 of Arsenal Pass. Here we are off the back of the second limited calling and a battle hardened with Classic Constructed results coming in. Kano at the top, unsurprised. No, but Hayden, I know you did a draft camp this weekend. Do you still maintain your opinion that this is one of the best limited sets of all time?
Yeah, it is. It's really good. It's there's a lot to this format, which is great. I think. I'm really interested to see where they go in terms of hero counts moving forward, because I think the 6 hero thing in Outsiders was fine. It felt fine. It feels really complementary to the set, I think, in terms of the card design, staying open to heroes as well as classes, the tension between what heroes want to pick what. I think the one hero that surprised me a little bit is Reinhardt, and not particularly for good reasons. I think it's the hero that feels maybe a little bit out of place in this draft format, to be honest, in terms of just tension of cards you want, things like that. But yeah, I mean, overall, like drafted 3 times on Sunday. Those are my first drafts since the calling the previous 2 weekends ago. It's been great to finally get in and play some more, getting into testing for LA. Played some Classic Constructed this week as well, which we're going to talk about in the pod. But yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying this limited format, so I'm super excited to play more of it. I need to not draft Olympia though in some drafts. I need to learn some other heroes. Yeah,
so I think that the disparity between Kayo and Reinhardt is definitely the largest. Reinhardt probably being, in my opinion, the worst hero in draft for this set. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, I believe that I would still pick KO more often than picking Reinhardt if KO didn't create the Might token. And if it just, no. I do 100%. And it just had the deck building positive of having, making your 5/6s. I think that would be enough. I think it would be a lot closer, but the Might token makes it not very close in my opinion. It really doesn't.
Reinhardt's not unplayable, though.
It's not unplayable, but it's just much worse.
There is good Reinhardt decks, but it's. I think this is fine, right? I think it's fine to have a hero that is the hardest to build and is going to be the least played of the heroes. I mean, we saw Alex Wall take it to the semis and honestly get a little bit unlucky not to make the finals in terms of his you live by the brute, you die by the brute, right?
You live by the blue and you die by the blue. I sent him a message and I said, hey man, we're going to save our blue off the top for a Kano top 8. Don't worry about it.
No, you went red off the top, dude. One time, ate a flare off the top. Oh, right, he's about Ragamuffins hat. Sure. Well, it just depends which order you Ragamuffins versus banish your Kano off the top. But yeah, I think it's fine to have that hero be, that 6 hero be. I think, since you think the kind of weakest, sure, but also like the hardest to get together. But when it's there, like you get the spec head. I think you need the spec head. You get the spec head. You get a number of Bone Breaker Bellows. At our draft on Sunday, I was in Brute, and Nick Butcher was like 2 seats down from me, and he ended up in Brute as well. But I got past or opened, maybe, I can't remember. Show No Mercy. Yeah, I got past a real late Show No Mercy in pack 1 and was like, oof, this is the Reinhardt spec, our preview card. And I was like, can I go into Reinhardt here? But I didn't have any Bone Breaker Bellows. Not like I opened the head or something and knew it was going to wheel. So shipped it down to Mr. Nick Butcher. He ended up taking it and drafting a Reinhardt deck. But I do think if the pieces come together, it's really good. But I won't disagree that KO feels very powerful in this draft format.
Yeah, I mean, KO feels powerful in this Classic Constructed format as well. Pretty strong here. I agree with you so far with my assessment of the draft format. I've been really enjoying it, actually. It's a stark difference from Bright Lights, like a stark difference. Which is, it's refreshing. I think the Bright Lights had its merits, but I was pretty skeptical, and they were like, yeah, we're kind of going back to Welcome to Wraith. We're trying to evoke that playstyle. I was like, I kind of, honestly, like, there was a part of me was like, maybe they lost their touch in terms of like, making a play experience like Welcome to Wraith, because we had so many sets that were so different from that. And I also thought, I was like, maybe Welcome to Wraith is not that good, because when we played Welcome to Wraith, we were all idiots. So maybe it's actually not a fun format. And I think that, the set has really evoked that play experience that I had back in 2019 and 2020 and improved upon it. So it's a really good set.
It's better as well. Honestly, it's better. It's a much better design set. The hybrid cards do such a good job. the power level of certain cards are really well balanced. It doesn't feel like there's too many unplayables in this set as well. Like a lot of yellow cards have a place in the set, as opposed to being like, okay, how many bananas did I end up with in my deck?
Yeah.
I love bright lights, unfortunately. So
I do think that blocking 3 is like really, really, really good in this format. More obviously, I think it's good in most formats, and it's good in general in Flesh and Blood, but in this format, just my opinion of 3 blocks, cards that I wouldn't have rated very high, cards that are not very good in my deck, but happen to have that 3 in the bottom right. My evaluation of those cards has consistently gone up. So yeah, the amount of like the 3 blocks that I want in my deck and how I prioritize this card has like been steadily going up as I played with the format more.
All right, let's talk about that, because you messaged me while the calling coverage was on and effectively said, like, is there an issue with this format in terms of damage density and blocks? And I think I said to you, this Kayo is about to absolutely smash this fatigue deck. You watch. But I think that, damage density is something that is important in this format. The amount of damage your deck can put out is important. But what that doesn't equate to is have more 3 blocks, deck will be good. What it equates to is synergy is really important, and you have to have good ways to win the game. You can't just purely trade value, because if you do, you'll run into a 1 of 2 Guardian in your draft pod who's managed to draft enough 3 blocks, and their deck will be good enough to potentially shut you out. But if you've drafted a deck with some synergy in it that has a mix of 3 blocks and 2 blocks, your 3 blocks are going to do jobs for you, especially on off turns, but you're going to have enough power cards to push through. And that's genuinely been my experience so far. And every time I've watched kind of a match where it's like, oh, the 3 blocks are really important here, it's not played out how probably I would have played the game, let's say.
Yeah, my point was actually a bit different from that. And
okay, lost in translation.
Yeah, you worded it a bit different, and I'm happy you did, because it was.
I maybe softened the edge just a little bit.
Yeah. But my main point was that this idea of deck damage and fatigue but mostly deck damage and how it starts from turn 0 of the game is a very anti-casual concept, and it feels like a burden to a player that is not deeply entrenched in the game. Yeah. And it's not that it shouldn't exist at all. It shouldn't be a primary game plan. And we talked about primary game plan many times on this podcast, like primary fatigue and how that's not good for the game. But I also don't know if it should be the primary rhetoric of the match is talking about deck damage from turn 0, because it is a very confusing and it's a very complicated topic, and it takes you away from like the match that's actually playing out to this other macro game that's going on that is a very hard concept to grasp, in my opinion, because like we're years into Flesh and Blood. Me and you are both years into Flesh and Blood, and we've been playing at a high level for a long time, and still watching a match and trying to figure out the economy of deck damage based off like potential starting cards in deck, counting graveyards, these cards, cards presented, etc. It's a lot. Like it's a lot, and I don't know. Like, if I was looking at Flesh and Blood for the first time, I'd be like, what the hell is this? Like, what is deck damage and things like that? So I really don't like primary fatigue, but I was more kind of venting about this idea of the deck
card economy and deck economy.
Yeah, because it's a lot to deal with, I think. And I don't think it is a positive, right? I think it's a negative, and then there's a lot of strategic depth that goes into it, and you can make it engaging and fun at a high level. But ultimately, I think it is like it's almost like a side effect of the Flesh and Blood design. So that I wasn't really complaining with like a solution in mind. I was just like, damn, this deck damage stuff is kind of lame.
I have a theory about this. So I just want to paint a slightly clearer picture because we're talking in some terms that are very familiar to myself and Brendan and a lot of players, but not for others that necessarily haven't experienced this discussion before. And basically, jump in if you feel like I'm butchering what you're saying at a broader level, Brendan. But basically, what Brendan is talking about is the fact that you have X amount of cards in your deck, generally 30. And honestly, it actually doesn't matter if you have more, because more cards doesn't mean more damage. It often means just more 2 blocks that you have to throw in front of something. But effectively, it's like the average value of damage you're going to get out of a card and how much damage you're going to be able to present or save over the course of a game. So effectively, like what your 4-card hands are able to do. If you can consistently make your 4-card hands with 13 to 14 damage in a draft format, that's probably really good. But then if that's just the game that it boils down to, that just means that, okay, who's got more value in the deck? Who can line up their blocks better? I think that's basically what you're talking about, right, Brendan?
And then you can also look at starting deck. So let's say starting deck totals are 32 v 32. You look at one player's side of the deck and you go, okay, this player has raw meat, so potentially 3 block. Let's say it's a 2 block equipment plus 1 block equipment. You go like, okay, those two pieces of equipment, or these 2 pieces of equipment, equate to 3 blocks. So that's an additional card. So it actually isn't 32 cards versus 32 cards. It's 33 cards versus 32 cards. It changes the dynamic of how these players can, manipulate the turn cycles and the value of their deck. And it's just it's a really complicated subject for me. I think not for me, just in general. It's a lot to deal with, because I do think that a lot of Flesh and Blood games, Flesh and Blood, though, just the way the game is designed, they are sort of that value attrition based gameplay. And I think that's very hard for I feel like it takes you away from the casual experience of just trying to visualize and watch these 2 heroes in the arena throwing haymakers at each other, where all we're focused on is this mathematical number of 32 v 33 and the decks are going down, etc. So
this is my theory, is that I think that is a self-fulfilling prophecy that has been created by high level or professional players, or whatever you want to call them, in this format. I think that is not something that the general armory population or the casual player need worry themselves with, because I actually don't think in a lot of the cases it is true. So, and what I mean by this in terms of self-fulfilling prophecy is that I think that people have this idea of how you play Flesh and Blood on this value matrix, off this math matrix, the Hamilton math, whatever you want to call it, in terms of how Flesh and Blood has developed over the years. But I think what happens is people sit down this format and they go, yeah, that is that. Okay, these 2 blocks are worth this. My 3 for 7s, because there's a lot of 3 for 7s in this format, right? That's kind of why fatigue isn't as much of a thing. But fatigue by damage, true fatigue, where you run out of cards, might be less of a thing. But fatigue by damage, just, presenting enough damage, your opponent in the future has to block with everything, is a thing. So that's the theory, right? And that's what people come to and they go, yeah, they start valuing cards like this, and then they play the game. And then they play the game in a way where they're attacking and blocking and trading their hand cycles, and they're thinking, you know what, I'm able to get X value out of my hand cycle versus my opponent being 1 or 2 damage down. And that's the thought process they go to, right? And at a high level, I think we're seeing a lot of players on both sides of the table doing this. The thing is that I think that is not necessarily true. That is not the way that the game has to be played optimally either. I think that is the way that the game is being played by a larger group of players. But that is because I think players have this idea that agency is real, and that the longer a game goes, the more opportunities you have for skill advantage, to execute the advantage out of your deck. And so basically what I think is that, and this is something that I've felt since the start of this format, when I started hearing people saying this and then playing it and having a different experience, is that synergy is actually really important in the set. You can build your deck in a way Did you see the Kayo game on stream where against the fatigue deck, where he's just okay, damage. Here's my, flat trackers, here's my agility token, right? I think players can go in and just build the deck, play the deck, attack the game. Is that always going to be optimal? No. Then that's why this kind of trade advantage thing comes in that you're talking about. Is that always optimal? I don't think so. And that's kind of the thing that I'm really excited about, is that I don't think that pure numbers and trading and this raw economy of scale or damage in a deck is actually as important as people are putting the emphasis on. And I didn't catch the coverage over the weekend. I know, Michael Fing and Brody were on coverage, and obviously this is something that they do a lot of, as participate in kind of the math of things. They're I guess similar to the Michael Hamilton school of thought. And so I don't know if that came through in the coverage. I think
it's the correct school of thought. I mean, me and you actually differ on this, because I've gone over to the other side now. I'm definitely in the math. Just play the optimal lines, get the most value. You'll win more games than you won't. I'm not disagreeing with that and saying that it isn't true. But what I'm saying is that's not 100-0. That's not the only thing that exists in this format. I think that's a really good thing. I'm 98 too. I do want to say for the coverage, I'm pretty extreme. I have some funny stories regarding that theory, and how some people who gave me some advice or some critiques that gave me that led to that inflection point where I switched over to the school of thought. For the coverage this weekend, it was Mansan's backup. Which I think is fucking hilarious, because the dichotomy and bingo card of the production value of this weekend versus, I don't know, every single world championship that's happened, and maybe even Pro Tour, you got to give that guy credit. It's better. It's so good. It's better. Period. Objective. Really you cannot argue that it is better. I thought the coverage team was really good as well. So my theory which we've talked about a lot on this podcast, not we've talked, but it's been brought up, is that I believe that if possible, the people in the booth should pretty much all be extremely good players. And I felt like this weekend was a great execution of that. Like Michael Fang and Brody, I don't know if they've ever had any experience on coverage, on camera, etc. But you can see it doesn't matter because they know what the fuck they're talking about and they're passionate, and it's pretty much always going to lead to a fantastic broadcast. And I thought that they did a very, very good job. I will tell you, and Hayden and I have talked about this a lot, most times when I watch a TCG, whether it's like I'm watching back an old VOD or I'm watching something live, if I know the game, I'm muting the coverage. This time I didn't. And that's the biggest compliment that you can give, I think.
Yeah.
So I thought they did a really good job, and I was really impressed. And it makes me kind of start to think, it's like, man, I think that this whole idea where it's like, oh, we need this like hyper focused host and play by play. Like I just don't really believe it. I think you just need people who know what they're talking about, that are passionate about the game, and are, I don't know, just like relatively professional, and you end up with a fantastic broadcast because the passion, it oozes through. You can't stop it. It just oozes through. If someone actually cares about the game and actually knows what they're talking about, like it comes through. And I thought it was really, really good, and it was one of my favorites. And I didn't mute it, which is really that's rare.
I generally always mute just because I've got other things happening at the same time. But I did listen to a couple of matches, especially after you told me, Brendan. And I think, I don't disagree with you. I do think that Sam O'Byrne did an amazing job, and he is the person who does bring that, I would say, structure to the cast. I would say one of the rounds that I listened to him, and I do think that is important, especially when there's lulls in the game. This format in particular, I think, is one of the best. It is just the best limited format we've had for coverage, because you have things like Clash, you have things like Wager. The tension in the game is always like pretty high. The game's reasonably fast, so I think it's a bit easier to get away without that structure. But anyway, no, I think obviously Savage Feats and what Nathan and Ethan do are just kind of fantastic. So
yeah. I do want to say one last thing, which on the Sam O'Byrne thing, because I agree and disagree with you, and where I disagree with you is that Sam actually kind of knows what the fuck he's talking about.
Of course he does. Yes, he does.
No,
he does.
but
Which is
way more,
best of both worlds.
A lot, way more than I expected. Like way more than just being able to direct the cast in like an intelligible way and allow the experts to speak. Like, I mean, he was right in the conversation of like the deeper concepts that were going on. So I was actually impressed, because I was like, bro, I thought this guy plays UPF. What the hell? How's he so good?
Ask him what his Fight Night record is on the 3 Floating channel, though. That's what
it's probably better than your record on this channel.
But I lost to calling top 8 of Brand Patrick. So. Not Cobra Kai's. All right. I just want to quickly just flip back to that sort of spiel that I shared, and I just feel that there's not a 0 to 100 is basically what I'm saying. There is, value, and understanding value in Flesh and Blood is so important, but in most formats and in most games, it's not the be all and end all. I'd say sometimes it 100% is. Sometimes you just play a value matchup and that is the truth, and sometimes that is the optimal way to play. But I think this format offers a lot in terms of it not just being that. And I think if you want examples of that, just go and watch Reinhardt just absolutely batter their opponent and present. I mean, I drafted on Sunday. I drafted a KO deck. I was 1 of 3 brutes at the table. I built my deck. I was like, this is pretty good. I sit down for round 1 and I present 19 damage on turn 1. I just go, okay. And then on turn 2, I did 16 damage. And it's like, what does my opponent do to that? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just... And people will say the opposite and say, oh, that's bad for the game or whatever. But like, that deck had tons of synergy. We got to that point. But anyway,
yeah,
let's get into the news.
Yeah. I am full. Like, I am so deep on that side of Flesh and Blood thought that, like, I actually think that way of thinking, of trying to eke out just incremental advantage or small points of value over your opponent, is actually just how you win in the long run. It pretty much, but at literally everything, every card game. And then kind of like life as well. Like if you're just a little bit above and you just eke out this little bit of advantage, if you do that on a long enough timeline, you're consistent. You don't take these, I don't know, subjective, context-based decisions all the time. Like, I think you just are better at games. Like, I really do. It's like, I don't know. I'm a true believer in the Michael Hamilton school of fab thought at this point, and I do have conversations about it because I'm like I asked Sasha and stuff, like some of the decks that are even good now, like second in the battle hardened, like via that school of thought in Flesh and Blood. How would you ever fund the Kano deck? Because the Kano deck is like fundamentally underpowered. It's just trash, and it's a multi-card combo to like do anything above rate. It's like you wouldn't, but maybe that deck is also just shit. I don't know.
I mean,
yeah. There's something you said in the notes, by the way. I want to. Well, we were gonna hit it, but Hayden writes, is Kano real again? I'd say no, but Majin Bay is still real. I don't know if Kano's real again, but Majin Bay is still Majin Bay.
We'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Look, I think Brendan, I think this Flesh and Blood's your first card game, right? Your first like true delve into a card game, right? And I think what you're describing, a lot of people will be out there listening and be like, welcome to the club, Brendan. Welcome to the dark side. A lot of people will say like, what is Hayden about to say here? What is he talking about? But Brendan, you are a true EV gamer. That is what you've become. And that is what long-term gamers are, is they are EV gamers. And that's why, math and positive trades and getting a little bit up on value over the long run is the game away. So welcome to the dark side.
I just want to 2-for-1 my opposing person, no matter what aspect of life it is. If I just 2-for-1 more times than not, I win.
That is the gamer mindset. All right, let's get into the news. Calling Hartford, as you said on the weekend, congratulations to Mark Morrison, taking his KO in top 8 all the way to take down the heavy hitters, Limited Calling. There was also a CC Battle Hardened, Classic Constructed Battle Hardened on the Sunday, which we'll talk about, because we're going to talk about Classic Constructed in this pod and the new face of Classic Constructed meta. So not only did KO win the Limited Calling, KO also won the CC Battle Hardened, piloted by Yuki Lee Bender. We'll talk about that as well. An 11-0 run, I believe. I think Yuki topped Swiss 8-0 and then 3-0 to win the event. And then lastly, Road to Nationals starts next weekend. We'll loop back to that at the very end of the pod, but if you're looking for where to go play your Road to Nationals, head to fabtcg.com, check out the Road to Nationals near you. They are draft and CC, so you can get amongst that. And then lastly, I don't know if you've seen this, Brendan, but there's this cool video that a New Zealand news publication did with James White.
I sent it to you, bro. What did
you send it to me?
Yes.
Oh, so I someone had already sent it to me earlier that day, and I'd seen it. But I said, "What is this thing?" And then you sent me the link. I was like, "Oh yeah, I've seen this." It is really good. Definitely go recommend checking it out.
Well, let's hit some of the key points of the video. If you haven't seen it, it's a video based, like you said, with an NZ news publication. They talk about Flesh and Blood from the entrepreneurial standpoint, what they've achieved. And I actually have the bullet points here. Friends and family funded start. Either will stay involved, either still involved or being paid dividends and likely paid back. 50 to 75 million annual turnover. 6,000% revenue growth in the last 3 to 5 years, from basically nothing to 75 million. Current growth rate 30%. Not needing to seek more capital to meet company expansion goals. Running on profit. Paying dividends annually to investors. And yeah, that's all the other stuff it's too complicated. Healthy profit margin. They're selling paper, so what could you expect? Yeah, but
it's 50 to 75 million revenue, right?
Yeah, rev. Well, that who knows? They even asked James like, hey, so like you're selling paper here, your profit margin must be pretty crazy, and he's like, we keep that card pretty close to our heart, because I mean, it could be 75 rev and they could be doing like, I don't know, 60, 50 million profit. Who knows? Like, probably not, but something ridiculous, obviously, because he was like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. But what you should know is that, I mean, we should take away from that is that Flesh and Blood is growing. It's making a lot of money. The company is doing great. Fantastic. They have been doing great. And I mean, James also in the interview talks about expanding to other markets, things like Japan, which they're very, I don't know, bullish for, hyped for, and we should be as well.
Yeah, the next set that comes out is going to be printed in Japanese. So that's phenomenal for the game. As James pointed out in that interview, the second largest trading card game market behind North America is Japan. Behind the US, sorry, country-wise, is Japan. Like, it is insane. And yeah, I think I felt pretty good after watching that video in terms of the health of the future of the next few years of Flesh and Blood in terms of from a business perspective, which I'll be honest, Brendan, I've not always felt that confident.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that makes me a little bit less confident, and this is just like being a bit cynical, is that their goal is to get to 1 billion turnover. And I'm just like, I think about, I was like, how are they going to do that?
How do you do that?
And it's like, it's probably going to be like, I mean, 75 to 1 billion. If you think about, I just wonder how much I, as a customer, will have to be exploited to reach that number, to be honest. But
it feels like a throwaway statement to me, to be honest. It feels like this large target in the sky, but I felt like James and then you stayed pretty true to their fundamentals. So
yeah, and you get the classic James White like passion as well. If nobody's ever seen James White talk about Flesh and Blood, then I think you'll understand why a lot of us got into the game 3-4 years ago.
It looks like you'll tackle the interviewer.
Jimmy was doing the like he did.
All right, Commander Cookout. Got a question this week. A lot of great comments in the pod last week. I just want to say, usually at the Commander Cookout, we've chopped and changed between the YouTube comment section and the Commander Cookout question. The YouTube comment section last week was just a lot of just nice and great comments about the interview we did with Brian Gottlieb. If you haven't gone and checked that out, definitely recommend it. Another great interview from lead game developer and... Oh, damn it. I butchered it again. Game developer and lead designer.
No, other way around. So, like, you got to think about, like, design is like, it's like the big boy job, It does like
I said it right the first time.
Yeah, you did it. So that is James, and I'm assuming that title will, because I fucked it up as well.
Yeah.
It'll always be James. Lead developer. Developers, they do, like, they tweak the numbers, they do the balance.
And senior game designer.
Senior game designer.
Brian Gottlieb. Anyway, go check it out. But Commander Cookout question this week comes from Brendan C. I think this is the champ from my locals, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's Brendan, but
strong name.
What are your thoughts about going first versus second in Heavy Hitters Limited? I started out calling weekend going second by default, but as the weekend progressed, I switched to going first to try set up some tokens and maybe fatigue my opponent a couple of cards. Is there a strictly correct choice, or is it hero and matchup dependent? Brendan, where are you at in Limited right now? How many sealed drafts, etc. have you done?
So I've only done about 2 or 3 drafts now, but I've played a lot of draft in the sense that I've watched a lot of drafts as well, because we have a testing Discord, and I've played a lot of draft decks. So a lot of times what me and Sasha will do, because it takes so long to draft, is we will just grab people's 3-0 decks, the 2-1 decks, and then we just start jamming them against each other just to like, because I feel like the easiest way for me to evaluate cards and to really crystallize what I think is
play them.
Yeah, is to play them. Just keep playing them. So I've played a lot of drafts, but I haven't drafted a ton.
So have you got a view? First versus second in this format? Is there a strictly correct take?
So right now, and I think that it's an interesting format, because I genuinely believe this could actually change. But for me, right now, let's go second, unless I'm playing against Betsy, where I'll go first.
I'm probably similar, I think, but I agree. I think there's a meta to this format. I think, Betsy's in particular are trying to draft these auras, and they really want to go first, and often they just won't play them if they're going second. Whatever it might be, right? There's a lot of value to going second in terms of token generation. So if you've got things to do on turn 0, and you don't think your opponent has anything relative to do on turn 1, I think I'm on the same camp as you, but I think basically it is matchup dependent, it is your deck dependent, and it is your opponent's deck dependent. So if you think that, for instance, on going second, you can use your full hand, I do think tempo is important in this format, right? And generally going second is what you do in tempo formats. But I also think there's a lot of setup opportunity in this format, where there's a lot of ways to make tokens on turn 0, whether that be through equipment, through cards like Agile Windup, through just attack actions or non-attack actions. The problem is, I think, that I'm leaning towards going second right now, is that going first in this format allows your opponent to do things like play tests and potentially get tokens going second as well, plus Agile windups and stuff. So attacking going first on turn 0 is actually pretty bad, I think, especially into Guardians and Brutes. So I think with that kind of said, I generally want to go second, but I actually think in the Warrior mirror, I'm pretty good going first, I think. And against Guardians in general, I probably want to go first. So it's interesting. I think there's a meta to it, and it's around the types of decks people are drafting and how they want to play. But I do think it really does come down to what's in your deck. How can you exploit either turn 0 or if you go second? So whether that's token generation, setup effects, or tempo going second versus tempo going second, and what your opponent's trying to do. So Brendan talked about going second, first against Guardian, and I think that's because if they get to go first, they get to do, especially Betsy, can either set up this big aura or just push damage.
Yeah, I think it's kind of TBD at this point, but I agree with our sentiment right now. I do want to say one thing about draft before we transfer to Classic Constructed. Just a little PSA. Because I was aware of this, but I wasn't aware of this. Legendary Studios, in their infinite strategic wisdom, took down Draft Fab. If you're looking to play at the Pro Tour or at any high competitive level, you should probably be drafting online. Because all the other good players are doing that, and they're doing it it's almost it's obviously not 100x, but it makes me think of 100. It's like 100x worse than Draft Fab. It is incredibly efficient. There are so many drafts getting pumped down. People have so many reps. If you are not utilizing the online resource of Flesh and Blood, maybe you're doing draft camps. That's probably similar in terms of preparation, but you should be aware that people are getting a lot of reps in. Like way more than you think. If you're like, I just go play at my local game store once a week, I'm going to play at the Pro Tour. Some people are probably getting in 3, 4, 5 a day. Just to put it in perspective, because I was not aware of the efficiency, Hayden. I was like, oh my God, it is ridiculous. I think there's obviously diminishing returns. You don't have to play 1,000 drafts before you go to the PT, but you should be aware that there are online resources to draft Flesh and Blood and play those draft decks in a curated format, and people are doing them en masse, and it is a very good tool for practicing. I know Hayden is not a big believer in that side, but you should.
I'm not a big believer.
You might not an enjoyer. You should definitely be.
I don't have time.
Yeah, you should.
To be honest,
you should definitely be aware that it is happening, and that sets the bar for the competition that you will be facing. Because if you're ignorant that exists, I think you're going to be very surprised when you get to the PT.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people have done close to 100 drafts this format, and it came out 4 days ago. The set came out 4 days ago. This raises other questions, to be honest.
You can't. The technology's only. You can't suppress it. It will only get better.
It's never fair.
If they try to take it down again, or if they try to, it will just get worse. I promise. The technology will not move backwards, and I promise LSS cannot stop people from doing this. And that's not me saying
just create something yourself.
Yes. People create them in-house private. The more barriers that Legendary Studios puts in front of doing this kind of stuff online, the more privatized and in-house it will become. And the more advantage groups of high-level players will have over the general player base. That's my point.
I agree. I think nothing's ever fair. I sit here and I go, do I like playing digitally? No, I absolutely hate it. So I try and avoid it at every point. But will I do it to make sure that I've got, the rest of the testing that I need to? Yeah, I think I kind of have to if I want to succeed. But that's just life, right? Like I also don't have enough time to do these things. I haven't done any of these drafts, played any of these drafts yet. I've only done in-person drafts where I've set aside this time because that's all the time I have, unfortunately. I don't have additional time to do this, which is another thing. So nothing's ever fair, right? Like, just is the way it is, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think, I mean, it's good, right? Like, people are going to be doing it. I think it's good to shout it out.
Yeah. If you're like that, my whole thing is like, if you're ignorant of it, it's a disservice. If you know it exists and you choose not to utilize the resource because you don't have time or you don't want to, that's totally fine. But if you show up to the PT thinking that you're drafting once a week at your local armory and you're prepared because everybody else is doing a similar amount of drafts to you and this is how people... It's not. It's not how it works. And it's not what other people are doing. Doesn't mean you can't win. Doesn't mean that preparation won't be enough. But you should absolutely be aware that people are cranking out, like you said, almost 100 drafts in 4 days. And
well, not in 4 days, but I'm saying 4 days after the set release. The set's been available.
The numbers are incredible. The numbers are incredible. The numbers are incredible, and people are going to be very, very well practiced. And it's. I know it's been around for a little while, but the level of preparation and mastery people will have over the set by the time they get to the Pro Tour, or even to things like Road to Nationals, will be unprecedented, and you should be prepared for that.
I think I take solace in the fact that I think that reps is not everything, which is and maybe I'm delusional, right, Brendan? But I think that there is a lot of, you're talking about playing with decks, right? For instance, not doing the draft. I think there's a lot of merit in that, to be honest, from a time perspective of learning cards and just playing games. There's also like a piece of, there's two things I think. There is a deeper fundamental understanding of how to play Flesh and Blood, and also learned experience in Flesh and Blood, and coming up with ideas that aren't insular, I think. And I do think there's advantage to that. But that being said, what doesn't hurt is reps. Reps never hurts. So.
Let me speak very hypothetically that what if, or if not, there was additional technologies that existed on top of this system to potentially aggregate things like larger sets of data and to understand, like, I'm just saying that the rabbit hole might go a little bit deeper than people aren't just jamming drafts. Like, it is very sophisticated.
Of course not.
Yeah, but like that's I agree with you. There's a diminishing return to reps, but I mean, some of the...
But you can do this stuff with data without playing the games as well.
Yeah, but the raw efficiency is crazy. It's crazy. I just want people to be aware that, like, if you're planning to play the Pro Tour, you should know what you're up against, because it's a lot.
All right, let's move on to the main topic. Let's talk Classic Constructed. Road to Nationals kicks off in 2 weeks. I want to get to the eventual question of Brendan, so don't answer it now, but I want to get to it through our discussion of what decks would you be looking at for Road to Nationals, and then I'm going to ask you at the end of the pod, if you just play a Road to Nationals this weekend, what are you playing? But anyway, let's take a look. There's Battle Hardened on the weekend on Sunday. Our first look at heavy hitters, Classic Constructed. 189 players in Hartford playing in the Battle Hardened. The meta looked pretty spread out. So we'll talk top level first. As Brendan would say, at the 10,000 foot view of this new Classic Constructed meta. Bingo cards galore. Dromai, most played deck. 21 copies out of the 189 players. So, it's like 10%, just over 10%. So not usually, even in early stages of the meta, usually we see like a couple of decks that people are like really keen on, really hot on. They might be more like 12, 15%. Dromai, 10%. Victor, about 10%. Then you drop into Livia and Azalea, 17 and 16 played representation. And then Bravo and Bolton. Those are the top 5 most played decks, but it's pretty close. Like, between so Dromai, Victor, Livia, Azalea, like they're kind of the top 4 most played decks in this event. But then between Bravo, Bolton, and then all the way down to Dorinthia, like it's pretty close. It's a couple of percentage points. So the meta was really spread. There was 3 heroes not represented. We have so many heroes now. 3 heroes not represented: Betsy, Viserai, and Dash.io, which means that there was a Tickler and there was a Riptide, and a couple of insets as well. So yeah, I don't know. What's your first? You look at this top line view. What's your first takeaway? I mean, Dromai most played.
Unsurprised. I mean, it's not surprising after the living legend of Icelander. I don't think that Dromai... It's so hard to say, because Dromai is a Rubik's Cube of a deck. It has multiple different game plans. It's very adaptive. It can be built in quite a few different ways. But I would say that if you were testing prior to this tournament and you were testing in an open format like Talishar, I'd be surprised if you were coming away with great results with Dromai. I was not. I was actually pushed off of Dromai after doing CC testing. We're still trying to...
You've played some Dromai?
Yeah, I played against it because I've been playing Hayden's doppelganger, Mr. Victor, who I think is very, 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 very good. Levia, like if you had your head in the sand, you're probably like, holy shit, there's 17 Levia. Levia's been the talk of the town, I feel like, online. There's a lot of Levia playing online, and people are super hyped for this deck. It just does insane damage. And yeah, I guess it just doesn't have any great counters right now. Like it seems like I don't know. I'm trying to figure out like why Levi is so good. I just haven't sunk my teeth into the deck. Azalea seems really powerful, but doesn't seem fantastic into Guardians, both Victor and Bravo. Bolton is still garbage. I don't know why people are playing that hero. By the way, none of you are going to hear me say Bravo is trashed here, this format. So you will not. There's quite a dynamic going on between Victor and Bravo right now. I think that inexperienced Victors will lose to Bravo quite a lot, but I've heard, and I think that matchup can be flipped in Victor's favor. That being said, Bravo's ability to close out the game with the evasion can be pretty relevant, I guess, in like a Guardian Mirror. So it's seen initially as an advantage, but it could change. Kasai, honestly, don't know much about it. Kayo, just a lot of, it does huge damage. It does massive damage. I haven't had any trouble playing against it yet. I'll have to check out Yuki's list. So sort of TBD there. I guess Reinar is like, I don't know how the Reinar deck compares to KO. And then ultimately, the last one I talk about here is Dash, because Dash did obviously very, very well at the World Championship. So I think we could see that soar. But the one that I have my eyes on, Hayden, this wasn't your question, is actually Victor. And it's because of what we talked about at the top of this pod. You just draw cards. Like, what the fuck? You just get an extra card a few times a game. That's insane. And then his specialization is like... Specialization is really easy to pull off because you get a gold token based off some sort of clash. Maybe it's the clash card Trounce or whatever, where you draw a card and you create all the tokens. That thing's insane. The gold just like sits on the battlefield And then you're able to, at some point when your Tunic is on 3, just cast his specialization, 2-card 9, I believe, with Overpower, and it's a really powerful turn cycle. Alternatively to that, if you don't have your Tunic on 3, you can also, if you have multiple gold tokens, pitch a blue for the gold, ideally draw another blue, and then play it off of that, which is just a really efficient line if you have redundant gold tokens. So I'm super high on Victor right now, and that's like the deck that I'm up on.
All right. So we won't wait till the end of the pod. Okay, yeah, I think in terms of the interesting things to take away from the meta breakdown, I think Victor being the new hero on the block and being the second most played was interesting, because I also think Victor's good. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about we'll talk meta, and then we'll talk actual strength of decks. But I think Victor is good, and I wasn't surprised to see it be the most represented new hero. But in that top 5, it's the only new hero, right? And then if you look at the next 5 most played decks, like you do see heavy hitters impact. It goes, Bolton's the same number as played as Kasai, then you've got Kayo, which is also the same, and then it drops into Rhinar, Dash, Dorinthia, Azuri. A number of those decks basically only, those top 6, sorry, 4 of those top 6 have impact of new cards. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I guess, is there any surprises on the other end? Like for me, Fi only having 5 copies being played, it felt to me like that was going to be the aggro deck to kind of format off in terms of when you start at one of the World Championships.
How are you doing against the Guardians though? Like that's my question. Is like
pretty good usually.
Really, even into Bravo.
Traditionally 5 pretty reasonable into Guardian. I think
if you looked at like Hamilton's deck,
yes, it depends on the list.
Yeah, Hamilton's Bravo deck from the World Championship, like the Bravo deck that they had that was playing to race Dramai. It seemed like it'd be quite good into Fi as well. Just running these like 4 for X's with on-hit effect that is bad for Fi. These 3 for X's are with on-hit effect that is bad for Fi. So I feel like, yeah, I would have been hesitant to bring Fi because I honestly would have expected more Bravo than we saw. But I'm assuming a lot of Bravo players hopped over to Victor to try that out this weekend.
I think so too. But you look at Dramai, that's a matchup Fi wants to play. You look at Leviah, I think that's a matchup that Fi wants to play in my experience. You look at, Azalea less so. But I think people, and also I looked at some of the Bravo lists that people played in top 8. Like people were expecting Fi by the looks of their cards, like Chokeslam, etc. Like they had these cards that do target these aggro decks. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised maybe to see that view of Fi, just also, given it won the World Championship. But I guess that leads my question. We'll look at the top kind of second, but like what is the aggro deck? Yeah, in this meta, I'm looking at this meta being like, what's the aggro deck? Is it just Azalea?
I'm just smiling because you said Fi won the World Championship, and it's like, we all know that, but like if we think about the World Championship, and at least for me, speaking from my point, the narrative of the World Championship is like, oh, Dramai, Dash, Icelander's gone. It's like those, for some reason, those are the decks come to my mind. I mostly because of like
2 ninjas in the top 8
numbers, and yeah, I know. It's just like, but for some reason, the narrative that I took away from it was very much Dramai and Dash focused, and Bravo to an extent, because Bravo didn't do well because Icelander showed up in force, but the deck looked pretty good when we did see it against anything that wasn't Icelander. What's the aggro deck? I mean, thank the Lord, there is no aggro deck, Hayden. No aggro deck it's probably Azalea. I mean, Azalea is relatively aggressive. Azalea also probably, I'm assuming it's not a great matchup for Fi. I mean, I haven't played Azalea versus Fi, but I played Azalea versus Briar, and it totally shit on Briar.
Yeah, I've heard that actually it's kind of pretty close. It's not just purely Azalea favor, which is what I would have assumed, but Fi players have told me that it's like, I mean, maybe they're Fi coping, but...
You know what, Dramai... Speaking of Fi wants to play Dramai, I actually think that matchup is closer than the Fis give it credit for, and it's also not as close as some of the Dramais give it credit for. Dramai's like...
I've never lost to Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, I have.
Exactly.
No, I have. I lost at Worlds. It's the first time I've lost to a Fi.
Exactly.
All right. Let's talk top 8 and the breakdown. So in the end, we have a top 8 that features 3 brutes. So we have 2 KOs, and an 80 card duplicate, I believe. So Yuki and Nia are on the same list of KO. Then we have a Leviah that made it in there as well. Then we have a Kasai, 2 Bravos, a Dash, and a Kano. So a pretty spread top 8. I think my first takeaway though is that the top 2 decks, Dromai and Victor, which make up around like 30% or just under 30% of the meta. No copies in top 8. Azalea, the 4th most played deck, no copies in top 8. I mean, we only talk about Bolton, as you said. But yeah, I mean, in the end, kind of a bit of a spread top 8 where you see I think my takeaway is like 2 KO and they're duplicate 80 cards is like, okay, something's going on there, right? Like this deck has to have something to it. And then obviously as well, the 2 Bravos, plus I think a Kasai and a Dash is quite interesting.
Where is the Dash? I don't see the Dash.
Oh, there's that graphic I posted, I think is incorrect. Rose is playing Dash, not Kasai. For some reason, there's a young Kasai. I think that was left over from their limited graphic, obviously.
Yeah. I think that the current Victor list is probably untuned. I think that the shell is really good, but like the last 15 to 20 cards is not exactly sorted out yet, especially when it comes to like the equipment suite as well, especially in the context of the Battle Harden, because I think people will be adding more Arcane Barrier into the decks. Yeah, it looks really...
Isn't it just Bravo? Don't you just play Bravo with some block cards?
I mean, maybe, maybe not. But you say that, but I also feel like the Bravo shell there's not a lot of room. I don't know. I'm always wrong when it comes to Bravo, but I feel like there's not a ton of room for creativity at the Bravo shell. Like a lot of cards are just like locked in. So every time I play Victor, I feel like I want a couple more pieces in my deck, you know? Like I feel like I'm missing a few strategic pieces to round out all my matchups. So we're kind of working on that at the moment. I just want to ask you, Hayden, what are your thoughts on Levi? I mean, KO, we can put a pin in it because we got to see the list, play the list. Maybe they had something that everybody else didn't. When I played against KO...
I've got the list here. We can talk about the KO, but you ask your question first.
Yeah, what do you think about Brutes in this? I mean, specifically Levi, what are your thoughts about Brutes? So probably, I guess Levi and KO, but specifically I want to hear Levi first.
I think, obviously Brute got a lot from the set, and we can talk KO in a second. I think Levi got the least. I think, there's a lot of talk of, if I see another tier list, I might bang my head against a brick wall, Brendan. But there was a lot of tier lists that came out last week of people, with their hot takes in Classic Constructed after the set hadn't even been released yet, which is fine, I guess. But my view is that I think it's gotten the least. I've played a couple of games with Levi. I've looked at lists. You get the Agile Windup. It's quite interesting. Apex Bonebreaker is a hell of a piece of equipment, one of the best pieces of equipment. Brute's had 2 of the best pieces of equipment printed recently, and that's kind of insane, with Scaling Fleshbag as well. But Apex Bonebreaker, effectively a card that you can get 5 value out of for all you math heads out there. Brendan's salivating at that one. 5 value out of a piece of equipment. That's insane, right? So, but that being said, it still has all the Levi problems it had before. None of these cards fix the problem of, okay, if I lean into any amount of blood debt, I have to deal with that blood debt. And the power level of the risk I'm taking on. So my 2 card 9s with Endless Maw, my 1 for 6s with Boneyard and Marauder, all this etc. stuff, my ability to play Art of War efficiently, all this stuff has to outweigh that in game, and I just don't think it does when you have KO and to an extent Rhinar there as well, able to do some of this value proposition plus explosive damage somewhere in the same vicinity without any downside at the end of the game. So, in fact, in Rhinar's case, massive upside in the end of the game with the Intimidate factor. So, yeah, Levi to me, honestly, I think it's the worst of the 3 Brutes in Classic Constructed right now, and I know other people would have it completely the other way around, but that's been my view so far.
I don't have enough hands-on experience with all 3 Brutes to make a call. When I had played against Levi, it looked strong, to be honest. Like the deck does look very strong. So I had my eye on it.
It is still good.
Yeah, it was like on my list as like the next deck I was going to test. Anyway, let's talk about this KO list. Is it? I can't hesitate to say the word atypical. It's the first time we're seeing a KO list. So what are your thoughts?
So we've seen some KO lists in the lead up. People the chat has been around Berserk, right? That's what people were talking about. Berserk is this, and you get to do these combo plays. You play your 6 pulpings, your 6 wild rides. Your damage, right? Or Blood Rush Bellow, and Berserk, and you just play that, right? That's the deck. I think people have realized pretty quickly that is not that it's not a winning proposition, but that it's got a lot of issues that really folds to any sort of disruption because it doesn't block well because of all the no blocks, and it kind of doesn't leverage the value of what KO's hero ability is, which is this might generation. So basically the list, it looks pretty similar to what I had expected. I think it's a mid-range KO list that Yuki and Nia played, and I think it's similar to what I'd been testing as well. I think this is the way to build it. I think you want to play a value proposition build. It's basically a lot of 6s, and Cast Bones, and Cast Bones is broken.
Good,
so
it's crazy.
I think that's literally what it is. It's like you have Cast Bones that can represent
0 for 6
a 0. Well, 0 for 8 in a lot of cases. But like even worst case scenario, it blocks 3. If you don't get to play it on an agility token, or you don't block out the turn prior, and you get like, say you hit a Blood Rush Bellow or another Cast Bones off it, and it's a 0 for 5. Like that's still a 0 for 5.
Yep.
Like that's still insane. So, and I think that's basically the strength that KO is going to play on. Well, played on the weekend with these 2 top 8s and a win, and also what people are going to play on for the near future. I think this is the strongest way to build KO. I think I completely agree with what they've done here. It's what I've been looking at as well. The card that interests me the most, they have No Fear in the deck, which I don't know if that card is particularly good, but maybe it is.
Yeah, Cast Bones is like the most obviously pushed card that I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, like obviously pushed card. Think about like Codex of Frailty. It's like, okay, it's pushed, but it's not as, this is just like, okay, it's 0 for 8, 0 for 5 on like, reasonable
Codex
floors.
of Frailty is pretty similar.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not as obvious.
Yeah.
This is like
right.
disgusting. Like it's totally face up. Yeah, it seems really powerful. I played against a lot of Cast Bones recently, and it's a sight to behold. It is a sight to behold.
Yeah, Card's good. I mean, this is a value-based KO build, and I think that's the correct way to build it. You leverage your hero ability, you leverage good Blood Rush Bellows turns with your Mandible Claw as your weapon. You leverage, obviously, Cast Bones and just good attacks. Runner is particularly good. Bare Fangs is a 2-card 9 in KO. That's pretty good. All these things, right? It's pure value-based. I think my kind of question is like, is KO the hero that got the Ranger treatment and is going to be like the big bad of this format? It's not. Cast Bones is not Codex, because Cast Bones requires you to have a lot of constraints in the way you build your deck, which Codex does not. But in saying that, Cast Bones is still very strong. But I don't think this is. I don't think we're looking at Lexi here with KO. I definitely don't think that. So as much as it is good, it is really value based, and I think that's a great way to attack the format on week 1. I think this is going to potentially struggle into decks that can present big bursts of damage, decks that don't want to value trade with you. So we'll see. It's good though, definitely good, and I can it makes sense that Yuki just swept it, because this list is very tight. It looks very refined for a week 1 list, I think.
I'm excited to try it out. I'm genuinely excited to try it out. Can I just find the list on Fabry, by the way? Sorry. I don't usually do this in the pod, but I'm going to try this out today. So
I've already sent it to you.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hell messages. Hell yeah. I want to talk about some of the other top 8 heroes as well, maybe while you peruse that. I think I have a question about Kano, which we can come back to. I think 2 Bravos is really interesting. I think Bravo, to me, if I'm like sitting down, I'm going, okay, what do I think of the decks that have to have a position in this meta off the back of the previous format? Obviously, we talked about KO coming in and being the newness, but Bravo is the one that's super interesting to me as well, because it was held down, I think, a lot by Icelander in the previous format. It's gotten some new tools as well, I think, not least of which is another blue 6, which really helps into Dromai. But yeah, I think, Brennan's no longer going to talk trash about Bravo, and that's because it's a real contender. Like, if I'm sitting there right now, in my view, the top decks in this format are Bravo, Azalea, Victor, and KO. I think like that's kind of the starting point of probably the decks that you need to understand.
But it's really Bravo or Victor, right? Like it can be both. I just don't see a meta where it is both. I feel like people are going to be divided, and then one will rise to the top. And I do wonder if Bravo's specializations are good enough to sacrifice the Victor hero ability, which is just absolutely disgusting. Like, you just get like really 2 to 3, maybe even 4 extra cards a game. That's just so ridiculous. But Crippling Crush is good. The other ones are not as good. So I don't know. I'm torn.
Golden Sun is pretty nuts. Like 2-card 10 with Overpower.
That card. Yep. Yeah. yeah. It's really good.
Trounce is broken.
Trounce is nuts. But that's the thing is like Trounce. I mean, Trounce is not always broken. Sometimes you got to take it out.
It's not actually broken. It's hyperbole.
Yeah, but you're playing against Dromai. It is broken. Like if you play against like not Levia, not Bravo, it is broken. Like it's a crazy card.
KO seems tough for Victor because you're never winning a clash. So you're probably very, very rarely winning a clash.
Yeah.
So are you siding out?
Yeah. Definitely.
block cards?
Well,
can you do it? And then can you win? Because now they're just a better value proposition deck than you because you've lost all your value in your deck.
I think you side out the bad ones. Like, I think you side out some of the clashes you really don't want to lose. But like the one that's like a 0 for, or X for 4.
Test of strength stays in because you care about giving them a gold.
You give them a gold, it's like whatever. And if you get a gold, it's like, oh my God, it's crazy. I don't think I put Trounce in. So I think it's relevant. It's relevant in like how you're siding your deck. It's like, oh, I'm going to lose most of the clashes. I also think that, you're playing Anathos in that matchup. You're not swinging the Miller's Grindstone because, obviously. So, yeah, it's relevant to the deck building, but I don't think it's, if you think about it if you had no experience with Victor, you're like, oh, Victor is really bad into the matches where he will lose most of the clashes. No, I don't think that he's bad. I think it's just you side in some cards and side out some cards, and he's still really good because even if your percentage chance of getting a gold token off Test of Strength is lower, it's still insane. It's so broken. Like it's hard to. There's a reason why people gravitated to Victor. It's because it's obvious.
Good.
It's obvious. It's so obvious that hero is powerful. It's just like Sasha was making fun of me because like, oh wow, the hero that draws cards is good. It's like, yeah, that is what it is. It's a hero that draws an extra couple cards a game. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way, right? I like to value on a single interaction, so it's in a vacuum, right? But Test of Strength, I win the gold, I draw a card, right? You draw off the Test of Strength? No, it's attack. It's attack, or you do draw.
No, you draw and you create. The first time you create a gold token on
off your effect.
Each turn.
Any turn.
Each turn.
Yeah, each turn.
Yeah.
So 0 for 4, I draw my card. So I'm 0 for 4, draw a card. I get a gold, and if I can turn that into a +3 on Golden Sun Overpower, I've got like a 0 for 10 and 1 card 10. That's a pretty good hero ability.
It's not even a stretch. Like it's the thing. It's like there's things like that have existed in the game. Where it's like, oh, you can get this like 1 card 8 or 1 card 10. It's like, oh, you got to jump through all these hoops. This is just so easy. It's so easy. You don't have to do you barely have to do anything. It's like, oh, maybe it's a little bit less effective versus KO. God forbid I give KO a token for my 50% chance to also get one and draw a card and have a 0 for 10. It's like, take that every day. The hero is just really, really good. I think that I think Victor has a chance to be the old him of this format, to be honest. Like, it just has that inherent value asymmetry. It does. And if it has the good card quality of Guardian, I think if you tune that list, it could be a real problem in this format. Problem in a good way, not like, it's okay.
I'm not seeing it. I think, there's no Crown of Seeds. There's only so many times you can trigger the hero ability in the game. Also, a question becomes, I think once people learn to play into Victor and come up with strategies, is like, sometimes that card just does nothing. I think it's going to be the big thing. And maybe Victors can adjust to that in terms of that card you draw just doing nothing. But we'll see. I do think Victor is very good. And I think it's a great pick for internationals. I think it's going to be a deck that we see impact early on in the meta. Where it lands, I don't know. I have concerns that if you're trying to play a value game, KO might just do it better. And I think the question for a lot of people heading to week 1 of internationals is, how do you beat KO? Like, what is your plan against this value-based KO deck? Like, it's got to be. It just won the first Classic Constructed event with heavy hitters. So what's your plan? What are you doing? And I think, we should say there was a PTI event in Manila. There was I believe a limited or Blitz Battle Hardened, and then there was also, I think, Blitz Battle Hardened won by Justin Q, which we should say, who is
2X.
the Calling Type A
champion now. Yep.
He won. Well, he's a battle hardened and a calling champion, but he did open a gold foil Apex Bonebreaker. Very nice. But there was a PTI event in Manila on the Sunday, and there was a lot of Ninja in that top 8 actually. And I believe it was. I have to go back and look at what won it. I think it might have been Bravo that won it in the end.
Yeah,
I think it's Bravo vs Kasai in the final.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any regionality-based deck decisions in Flesh and Blood, I think that Ninja in Asia is one of them. Like, it's been like that since 2019, 2020. They had like way higher representations of Katsu, both in like the early formats, like Crucible, but even in the later formats, there was still Ninja showing up. So that could be a reason there was a lot more Ninjas. Just there's like a inclination to play that hero over in that region. But I would not be surprised to see Bravo win it if there's like a ton of Ninjas that show up. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, like, there's regionality is a huge thing when it comes to formats for these lower tournaments in Flesh and Blood. Like, we see it all the time in Europe. But ultimately, when we get to the World Championships, I think we do coalesce on just like the best decks, or Pro Tours, of course.
Yeah. And then Ninja wins the world championship.
Yeah.
I think in Asia has often been fairly. They do love aggro decks. I will agree, but the Prism and Dorinthia has also been pretty big in that region as well. Okay, I think some other quick questions I want to blast through to finish off this kind of first look at Classic Constructed is Dromai. Is it just tier C or third tier or second tier at best now?
No way. There's no way it's tier C. Like, I don't know. Dromai is like it's a funny hero because, like, I think that there's, the community is really split on a lot of its matchups. And like, I mean, very split. Both sides calling it 90-10s. You can think about like the Dromai Bravo matchup. Like, it's just like it's everybody has their own idea, and I think that happens for a lot of Dromai's matchups. So Dromai Phi. So I would not count Dromai out whatsoever. It's also possible that the Dromai deck needs to be refined a bit for this metagame. So I mean, I just think the hero's really powerful, and I don't think you can get around that. I mean, if the format is all Kayo and Levia, then maybe it's a different story. But ultimately, Dromai is just one of the best heroes in Flesh and Blood. It's always had a shit conversion rate, so I wouldn't be. This doesn't deter me.
I mean, it didn't in the national season prior to the printing of Tome, Imperial Flame. To be honest, it had a really good national season. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm really down on Dromai, and I'm someone who played a lot of Dromai last year. It just doesn't particularly interest me right now. I think it has a lot of tough matchups. I don't think it has a particularly good matchups, honestly. Like, I'm looking at this being like, okay, so we've got a lot of brutes in there. We've got a lot of guardians in here, and things like Azalea, etc. Like, a lot of aggro decks. Like, there's no necessarily Icelanders for me to look at. There's no kind of aggro decks that play on... have challenges into necessarily sort of attacking me in a very aggressive manner and a more kind of, Rosetta Thorn decks, basically. Those I think were fine for you. So I don't know. Warrior. Kasai makes top 8, but there's, obviously that's the third. We've talked about Guardian, we've talked about Brute. We've got to talk about Warrior and the cards that it seems like it's the third right now in terms of what Heavy Hitters has done. We're talking a lot about Victor, we're talking a lot about KO and Livia and Reinhardt, etc. But what about the Warriors? What about Kasai? What about Dorinthia? What about Bolton? Are any of them good? And if so, which one's the Warrior to look at for Roast National season?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I just haven't had any experience versus the Warriors in the past week or so. So
all right, I have.
There you go.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I've got a couple of friends who are really high on Kasai, and I've been, I would say, underwhelmed so far with Kasai. I'm not particularly excited about it. I think Valiant Dynamo is an insane piece of equipment, right? And I think Kasai gets to leverage that. The decks I've seen so far or played against or played with have felt like there's just not quite enough damage. They feel like they're struggling from both a value proposition a little bit, but also from a damage output threshold. So I think that Kasai, it may end up being the warrior of choice, but it's going to be specifically tuned to a meta. I think I can see that's being Kasai's place. On the flip side, Dorinthia, I think, is the explosive one. I think that's the one that might be of most interest to me. There's a lot of different ways you can build it. I think that what I'd be looking at is more of some of the offensive cards. I don't like these Decimator Axe stories. I don't think they're particularly good. But, a really explosive build, either Dawnblade or dual wielding weapons, I think is quite interesting. Bolton, I don't know, man. I don't get it.
At this point,
Bolton.
I don't want it to be good because the people that have been saying it's good for a long time were just coping so hard. It's like they don't deserve it because those people are not willing to acknowledge reality. It's like if Bolton is ever actually good, they're going to be like, we were right all along. And it's like, come on.
The Bolton players are looking like the Brute players of old.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or the Prism players now. I have my own Prism, actually, to be honest.
Prism's interesting. If Dromai doesn't exist in the format because it's falls out of favor, then Prism becomes very interesting, I think. We'll come back to that one, I think, once we've got some more reps in the format. We talked a little bit about Kano. Dash, I think Dash has got to be up there. I talked about those 4 decks before. I think Dash is kind of that 5th deck in that upper echelon of decks that I think people have to be looking at. It's just consistent. Like, it just has powerful cards, it has powerful game plans, and just always been good, and it has this ability to, like you said earlier, play a hybrid game plan, which is really powerful in a format that has a lot of heroes in it. So, yeah, let's finish up with the question, Brendan. I guess you kind of already answered it, but you're heading to Road to Nationals this weekend. What do you recommend playing, or what would you be playing? And maybe if it's not Victor, what else could it be?
If it wasn't Victor, it would probably be Bravo. But it could, I mean, honestly, it could be KO after today. I got to try the list. Like, if it's good, then I'd probably play KO. But I just think that Bravo, it was kind of consistently mid for a long time. But due to the power level of the format, I think that consistently mid is now consistently good. So it's a pretty consistent deck. And I feel very comfortable on it after doing a lot of testing for the World Championship previously. And yeah, it's just solid. Like, it can beat pretty much everything, generally. I don't think it has huge margins on a lot of the format, but like just a deck that I think is really consistent. So that's why I would pick it.
Good Guardian. Well, Brendan, no surprise, I would play Brute.
Which one though?
That's a great question. I think Levia's out for me. I want to test a little bit more and make sure of that. But every time, like, basically, I try. There's so many heroes now, so I've got to do some fundamentals from a theory standpoint. And the theory on Levia to me hasn't changed. I think, you get Wind Up, you get Apex Bonebreaker. Unless there's something that's more groundbreaking than that, I kind of don't have enough interest. I do have interest in KO and Reinhardt, though. I want to play Reinhardt. Like, that is obvious, right? Like, if I can play Reinhardt, I would love to finally be able to play Reinhardt. Is it good enough? I don't know. I've been really enjoying my testing. I feel like I've got a list that feels good. I would probably just play that if I had a Road to Nationals next weekend. Would I recommend it? Probably not. I'd probably recommend KO, I think, at this stage. But I think both Reinhardt and KO are quite powerful. And if I'm talking about those top echelon of decks, I think in my testing so far, and from what I'm looking at, I might put Reinhardt in there, but I'm also, KO is probably default right now, looking very good, and there's a few different ways to build it. In terms of like some of the other heroes, I think that I would look at. I honestly agree on Victor. I think Victor looks really good, and that might be my recommend for anyone who likes that style of value deck or Guardian, is to go and look at Victor for first week of Road to Nationals, to be honest.
Yeah. It just draws extra cards. It has Guardian cards. Guardian cards are good. Has good equipment. Fab fundamentals. Victor is a good hero. So you really can't go wrong. I just think the list needs to be honed in a bit.
And also, if I was an Illusionist player, I might play Prism at week 1 of Road to Nationals. Not sure why.
I have zero experience with the new Prism. So I have a list that I'm actually testing out very soon from Rhea. Just snagged off of her stream, so I'll get back to you on that.
I played it a bit. It's a fun hero to play as well. There's a lot of complexities. I think it's cool. You obviously got a new weapon as well. All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 148 of Arsenal Pass. Taking a look at the first heavy hitters, Classic Constructed implications. I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments. Is KO the new face of Classic Constructed in Flesh and Blood for the next small period? Or is there another hero that maybe didn't perform this weekend? Maybe it is Victor. Maybe it is Chad Victor himself that is going to come through. Or maybe it's something else. So let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like, is there hope for me? Is Reinhardt real? Brendan, you want to take us out?
Yep. If you're listening to this podcast, you enjoy it, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Wherever you're listening, it helps us so much, and we read every single review. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/ArsenalPass. Twitter's at BrendanAPG and Fien_Dale. And a special shout out to all of the Arsenal Pass patrons. Got deck packs coming soon, probably one in the next 1 to 2 weeks. Ideally snagging someone from the Battle Hardened. And just stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.